Throughout history, mining has stood as one of the United States' most perilous occupations. At the turn of the century, men toiled with rudimentary equipment, resulting in an average of 1,900 miner deaths per year. The fatality rate remained alarmingly high until recent years, when modern machinery and improved mining techniques coupled with stricter safety regulations were implemented. Yet, the peril is still obviously there. Welcome back to Roanoke Tales, where today we talk about the tragic events of the Farmington Mine Disaster. So let's get started. One of the events that reshaped mining history in the nation occurred in Farmington, West Virginia, a small community situated 100 miles south from Pittsburgh. Until then, Farmington's claim to fame had rested on being the hometown of Sam Huff, the legendary linebacker for the New York Giants and later the Washington Redskins. However, for 10 days in 1968, the attention of Americans was riveted on this town and the gripping tale of 78 of its inhabitants. This was the heart of coal country USA, where generations of men had spent the majority of their lives working underground. The Consul No. 9 mine, owned by the subsidiary of Consolidation Coal Company, first opened its doors in 1910. On November 20th, 1968, just after 5:30 in the morning, a massive explosion reverberated through the mine, sending shockwaves across the region. Smoke billowed out from the shaft underground, and several miles from the epicenter of the blast, a loud roar echoed, alerting a number of miners that something was gravely amiss. 13 managed to reach safety under their own power, while 8 others crawled to the bottom of the shaft where they found enough oxygen to sustain themselves. They waited for nearly 5 hours until a portable crane could lift them to the surface. By 10:40 that morning, 21 miners had been rescued. The initial explosion was so intense that it shook nearby homes and destroyed the miners' lamp house, where records were kept for the shift. Throughout the day, efforts were made to contact miners' families, revealing that 78 men were actually still missing. Soon, their family and friends gathered at the company's store, which served as a temporary command post and a place to seek updates. Among the anxious waiters were not only wives but also mothers, as many of the missing men were young and a part of a newly added crew. Unofficially, one mine inspector expressed doubt about the chances of rescuing the men, stating there's really not a chance in the world they're going to be rescued. However, officially, no one was willing to concede such a grim outcome. Ken Heckler, a congressman from West Virginia at the time, expressed hope that perhaps there might be a pocket of air in a section of the mine where the men could have sought refuge without inhaling carbon monoxide. But despite the pervasive pessimism, company officials declared their determination not to abandon their rescue efforts. William Poundstone, the executive vice president of Consolidation Coal Company, affirmed, "We do not intend to seal the entire mine." They continued to operate ventilation fans in a hope that if the men were still alive, they could receive oxygen. Sealing off all portals and shafts would only be considered really if any other rescue attempts failed. In the ensuing days, more explosions occurred and the fires continued to spread. Representatives from other mines who had arrived to support the families openly criticized the mine's safety standards, citing violations found during federal inspections over the past 5 years. They also recalled 2 previous fatal explosions that actually happened within these mines, which, under different ownership, had occurred in the past 14 years. The company and the United Mine Workers both denied the charges of safety violations. Lewis Evans, the union safety director at the time, emphasized that conditions in the coal mines can change rapidly from safe to hazardous within hours or even minutes, and as time passed, the wait became increasingly agonizing. 6 days had elapsed, and hopes were fading as there had been over 20 underground explosions since the initial one had erupted from the mine. Carbon monoxide gas hindered rescue efforts, forcing teams to retreat at points 2 to 4 miles away from the trapped men that were believed to be there. But despite their efforts to explore further, rescue teams postponed their exploration due to new fires erupting from underground. Meanwhile, drilling teams continued to search for additional sites to bore holes where the men were presumed to be trapped. Microphones were then lowered and had failed to detect any signs of life. While air samples consistently revealed high concentrations of explosive methane gas and carbon monoxide, on the 8th day after the initial explosion, Consolidation President John Corporate conveyed that there was little hope to rescue the 78 trapped men. Nonetheless, family members pleaded for the rescue operations to persist. And so, the arduous drilling continued into Thanksgiving week. 78 food packages had been assembled for the families and trapped miners. A nearby supermarket in Fairmont generously donated 17-pound turkeys while the United Mine workers provided the remaining groceries. Despite the holiday passing without any signs of encouragement, hope did persist. However, on November 29, 1968, 10 days after the initial explosion, representatives from the company and the United Mine workers and state as well as federal authorities reached a somber conclusion. They determined that all rescue efforts had been in vain as air samples lacked sufficient oxygen to sustain life. Thus, it was decided that the mine should be sealed, leaving 78 men entombed 700 feet below Farmington. The tragedy raised serious questions about the safety concerns throughout the coal fields of Appalachia. There was a prevailing attitude that had prioritized production over safety. The recovery and investigation spanned 10 years, yet the precise cause of the explosions remained elusive. Federal investigators believe that inadequate ventilation triggered the initial explosion, exacerbated by factors such as adverse weather conditions, inadequate rock dusting, accumulations of coal dust, and insufficient testing for methane gas. Many in West Virginia had long questioned the safety practices at that mine, with complaints about its gassy nature and challenges in ventilation. One foreman later testified that production had been halted that night before the first explosion due to high levels of methane gas. West Virginia attorney David McAteer, an expert in mining law, extensively studied the Farmington disaster. Consolidation Number 9, also known as the Heart Mine, had gained notoriety as a hazardous operation where management often disregarded the health and safety concerns of its miners, which is not really usually a great idea. There were documented cases of miners who had voiced complaints about the working conditions in the mine only to face demotion and reprimand with little assistance from their unions. Former Congressman Ken Heckler echoed sentiments about the prevailing attitude that prioritized production over worker protection, emphasizing the shared responsibility between the mine operators and the United Mine workers. The mine remained sealed for nearly a year until September, when operations commenced to recover the bodies of the 78 men. Over the next 9 years, 59 bodies were recovered before the mine was sealed for the final time on November 1st, 1978, as the chances of finding the remaining 19 men dwindled. Mining has long been a perilous profession, with over 20,000 miners losing their lives in West Virginia since the turn of the century. Safety concerns, once paramount in the 1930s and 40s, gradually took a back seat to mechanization and increased productivity per man-hour, especially as the coal industry faced heightened competition from oil and gas following World War II. However, the Farmington disaster served as a stark reminder of the inherent dangers of coal mining, alarming many, including New York Times correspondent Ben Franklin, who had witnessed the events firsthand in 1968. Also, what a name. People would begin to arrive, starting with the governor of West Virginia, Governor Smith, who acknowledged the inherent hazards of mining, stating that as long as men ventured underground to extract coal, fatalities would unfortunately occur. While his remarks seemed to excuse the tragedy as an inevitable aspect of the profession, they reflected the sentiment of many in the mining industry. However, federal officials, such as Assistant Secretary to the Interior Cordell Moore, offered assurance that the safety record of the company, expressing confidence in the efforts to ensure mine safety despite the inherent risks. Also, one of the inherent risks that's usually not talked about is literally called black lung. It's where coal dust builds up in your lung, and this can lead to like cancer, difficulty breathing, damage to the alveolar sacs. Basically, everything that you don't want in your lungs kind of just ends up in there. So, not great. But Anthony Boyle, the president of the United Mine Workers Union, echoed similar sentiments, acknowledging the dangers associated with coal mining while emphasizing the cooperative efforts between labor and management to prioritize safety. Interior Secretary Stuart Udell, however, expressed dissatisfaction with the industry and department's response to mine safety concerns, calling for stricter regulations and initiatives to prevent future disasters. Udell's stance reflected a growing recognition of the need for comprehensive mine safety legislation, while Congressman Ken Heckler emerged as a prominent advocate for such reforms, pushing for tougher regulations on Capitol Hill. The Farmington accident served as a catalyst for change, prompting the Mine Safety Conference in Washington and ultimately led to the enactment of significant mine safety legislation. This tragedy underscored the urgent need to improve safety standards and regulations within the mining industry, paving the way for extensive mine safety law in history. Since 1900, mine accidents have claimed, again, over 100,000 lives just in the United States, with Roanoke, West Virginia, located only 12 miles from Farmington, sharing the same rich coal vein known as the Pittsburgh Seam. At the turn of the century, coal reigned supreme, driving the Industrial Revolution and establishing America as the world's leading coal producer. However, this economic prosperity came at a grave human cost. Workers, often recruited from Europe, endured harsh conditions in the mines, working long hours under perilous circumstances to provide for their families. David McAteer challenged the notion that industries could operate without regulation, arguing such as a laissez-faire approach led to the devastating consequences. Indeed, the coal industry's disregard for safety resulted in a staggering number of fatalities, surpassing even the deadliest battles of the Civil War. The catastrophic explosion of the Mangua in 1907, which claimed the lives of 362 miners, prompted national outrage that led President Theodore Roosevelt to denounce the appalling death toll. Subsequent hearings and conferences culminated in the establishment of the Bureau of Mines in 1910. Yet, progress towards improved safety standards was slow, and the death toll continued to rise. Amidst labor movements in the 1920s and 30s, the United Mine Workers, or UMW, under the leadership of John L. Lewis, emerged as champions of mine safety. Lewis, a controversial figure at the time, viewed safety as a fundamental aspect of the union's mission and negotiated groundbreaking safety provisions for miners, empowering them to refuse unsafe work without fear of reprisal. While modern equipment mitigated some risks, the challenges of ensuring mine safety persisted, underscoring the urgent need for comprehensive solutions. Miners continued to face peril, and it took yet another tragic holiday incident, this time in Illinois, just before Christmas of 1951, to spur further congressional action. Following this accident, John Lewis testified before Congress, highlighting the societal responsibility that we all share for the risks miners undertake to fuel our comfort and security. The resulting 1952 Coal Mine Safety Act represented a significant milestone for miner safety, introducing annual inspections in underground mines and establishing safety standards. While enforcement and penalties were limited, this legislation marked progress in advancing mine safety. For 16 years, the 1952 Act remained largely unchanged, still in effect when Farmington disaster struck in November of 1968. While the tragedy galvanized public demand for reform, leading to the passage of the Federal Coal Mine Health and Safety Act of 1969, a year after of debate, this comprehensive law revolutionized the government's role in mine safety and provided benefits for miners afflicted with black lung disease. Since the Farmington accident, increased vigilance and mechanization have significantly reduced mine fatalities and injuries. American mines today are the safest that they've ever been thanks to these modernization efforts. And despite the inherent risks, the coal industry remains vital, with Appalachian communities honoring the memory of 78 Farmington miners and countless others who have sacrificed their lives for mine safety and the fact that we can still, run electricity in our country. As we reflect on the living history, we're reminded of the extraordinary resilience and dedication of American miners who continue to contribute to the nation's prosperity. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leave me a like, would be fantastic of you, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. So this channel is really becoming cryptids, missing people, and just talking about disasters and how they got rectified. Not rectified, but how we learned things from it. Not really sure what I'm doing with this channel at this point, so I hope you guys are enjoying it. If you are, then leaving a comment, again, would be great to let me know what you guys think about everything. But I want to thank my patrons real quick. At the literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Stupid Fox, and Trash Pan in a Trench Coat. Thank you guys. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Wet Skeleton. At the first-hand accounts, we have Cody Cherry Drake, Yeeps, and at the second-hand accounts, we have Bianca, Kanan Johnson, Fred Rush, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I appreciate y'all's support as well. It's greatly appreciated and helps kind of keep everything running. So that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you have a suggestion, put it in the comments, and I'm going to wrap it up here. All right, guys, take care.